let me first of all observe with a great pleasure that the majority of the auditors are ladies, and I hope you ladies have far more sensibilities than men, and I hope in the future some of you will be writers with great feminine sensibility. This is my first observation, and now it took me a little time to decide what presentation to make to you, because last Tuesday I gave a lecture at the Nor Haraj, the only Armenian daily in Paris. The question was, I studied the issue of questioned concept of home with Saroyan. What does it mean, home, for William Saroyan? And we, of course, had a very nice discussion on this subject. And then I was somewhat confused to see what to present to you. And I thought that it is very, very important that I study with you as students the questions of methodology that I have taken in order to study, to write these 4 volumes that it took to me 20 years. And don't you ever think that in the beginning of 20 years I sat down and tried volume 1, volume 2, volume 3. Absolutely not. I started with, I think, with volume 1, and then ideas and the writing process, the concepts, led me, 1 volume became 2 volumes, 3, and 3 became 4. So this we call working process. And after all, finally we have the 4 Saroyan volumes. And of course, no author consecrates 20 years or a writer who has not affinities. And you can understand what I mean by affinities of the writer. This preface, which I call fragments for methodology, or a short work about the methodology I chose. And in the beginning I put Nora Balakian is a very, very famous 30 years of art review, literary reviewer of New York Times. And she had a very great, she has written a book, The World of William Saroyan, and Critical Approaches, etc. And the first word I read is, does one need to explain the rainbow? Coming to critical approach of Saroyan's work. Does one need to explain the rainbow? The music of Mozart and Chopin, the painting of Cézanne. Yet this is dealt with the poetic aspect, so-called simple aspect of Saroyan's work. But at the time, that is during the 20th century 30s, the critical arguments of the Saroyan generation concentrated around the question what the writer should say and in what form to express that. That is, a short story begins, the middle, the tension, and then the conclusion. Saroyan refuses such impositions, and he says, one who writes says 20 words which are fresh and genuine. These words themselves represent form. And the question of form of short story in any literature, equally to Saroyan, is a very important problematic.
Technical issues.
It happens everywhere.
Yeah. Cleaning ladies are the main authority.
No problem. She's most welcome.
Yeah.
She's most welcome. But then, now as we see, Saroyan refused the classical terms of literature and writing. And besides, in this case, we have to take into consideration what Saroyan declared, that the writer is a spiritual anarchist. The writer, who is a writer, is a rebel who never stops. And all his life, up to the last moment, William Saroyan was a rebel, always against, and he was for the rights of the individual in the society. And even in his writing, he said he cannot resist the temptation to make any law which designs to hamper the spirit of man. How can this valuable creature, the man, can be object to strict laws? In this respect, Nona Balakian says something very important. Many people, majority of readers, think Saroyan is a happy-go-lucky storyteller. Wrong. Nona Balakian says it is necessary to read continuously over a period of time. One can reach to a true estimate of his stature as a writer and find answers to his inexhaustible creativity. When we say inexhaustible, Saroyan is such a free writer. That is, for Saroyan, there is no subject that cannot be written. Now, supposing Saroyan is here, he will say how a Saroyan scholar came and talked to the student. He will turn it up into a short story. There is nothing he cannot. For that reason, inexhaustible creativity, which he proves in his short stories, in his plays, in his biography. And, well, of course, in this presentation, I take Nona Balakian and other writers take into consideration that William Saroyan was not well considered as it was necessary as a great writer by Anglo-Saxon critics. You just came in, I was talking about the latest biographer of William Saroyan, who is called John Leggett. He has written a very interesting book on Saroyan, but in the introduction he says, Saroyan was not gifted enough to enter the pantheon of American writers. I repeat, was not gifted enough to enter the pantheon of American writers. And I objected this, saying, by what right this gentleman gives such a categorical idea that he is not gifted. And I say that this is not exception to the rule, because there are many other Anglo-Saxon critics that did not find Saroyan gifted. Now, the first book written on Saroyan was written on by Howard Flom by the title of William Saroyan. In this, the gentleman says, Saroyan has not been subject to serious study in American literature, and this pained very much Saroyan himself. And in this respect, there is that Robert Flom remembers Eric Bentley. Eric Bentley is a very good American intellectual who has translated and vastly written on Bertolt Brecht. This man, who is such a respectable intellectual, who has said, sloppy language of William Saroyan. Sloppy means, let me put it this in Armenian, ajanos lezu. And what does Saroyan say? And Saroyan's answers one cannot expect an Armenian to be an Englishman. And later on he says, I write working class Armenian English. I think this is the right answer of Saroyan. He was a very sharp man, answers to any Besky's attitude. Then there is another appreciation of William Saroyan by Peter Saroyan, who actually he died lately. He was a New York American Armenian novelist who says, as far as Saroyan works are concerned, the view of the academics has been, don't look at him at all. The loving, lovely, nice person has been, don't analyze him at all. This is the overall idea, as if Saroyan is only has good outlook of the world. He doesn't see the bad side of the world. So there is no reason, he's a good man, don't study him. And don't analyze him because it is enough. And the staff bears, but Peter Saroyan asserts, Saroyan's staff bears reading transcends time and place. This term is very important. That is, you cannot limit Saroyan to a simple place and time. And in other words, he meant that Saroyan's writing is universal writing. There is another American writer who is Jack Trevor Story, who said that I follow Saroyan. When you are writing, he's a writer. You can't find a word, just put the first word that comes to your mind. And he says something very important. Whenever I am dry, that is when I am not creative, I read Saroyan, I become creative. And it is actually the case to any other writers because he had an enthusiastic, creative attitude. Then he says about Saroyan, he is saying them, that is, to the reader, without rancor, anger, or bitterness, and because, unlike the rest of artistic world, few exceptions, he is a man who believes himself to be mortal. This is a very important term concerning the concept of mortality that Saroyan has. And because he has studied the question of mortality in human being, in himself, and as a metaphysical question, he says things without rancor, without bitterness. That is, this comes to the question of, a very important question of death. And let us remember at this point, the great German philosopher Martin Heidegger, who said that the greatest trauma of human being is death. And this applies absolutely to Saroyan's outlook and Saroyan's existential ontological outlook of the world, that he was traumatized by the question of death. And this gentleman, Trevor Howard, concludes, in the world of William Saroyan, there are no villains, because being only human himself, he prefers not to see them. This is a very important problematic. Certainly, Saroyan sees the good side of human being. Not that he is not a great observer, but he shows to human beings that it is better to be good than it is to be evil. And in this case, one cannot exclude the fact that his father was a Presbyterian pastor, and I believe, and this is a fact, that Saroyan was very much influenced by the Bible, by reading the Bible, all the Bible. Now become enough. I am showing you a series of writers who know how to appreciate William Saroyan in a positive term, in spite of the Anglo-Saxon critics who have absolutely neglected the creative side of William Saroyan. We will come back to that. And there is another Irish painter by the name of Peter Hamill. He was in Mexico in 1956, and he reads the volume of The Daring Young Man on the on the Trapeze, that constitutes 26 short stories, and 9 of them speak about the right of disorder. And when Peter Hamill reads it, he says, this crazy Armenian from California, doing his own writing for him, he touches writer's meats in the same stumbling, uncertain manner, discovers his personal myth. This is very important, the personal myth. That is, Saroyan has constructed his myth as a writer. While Peter Hamill, after reading The Daring Young Man on the Flying Trapeze, he was a painter. And when he reads Saroyan, he becomes a writer. This is a very interesting thing. A painter, because the painter reads William Saroyan, becomes a writer. Now, Peter Hamill says another important thing. At this point, as I said, Hamill decides no longer to be a painter, but decides to be a writer. He wants to express something about the way time-affected painting was not the medium. Saroyan, he writes, was dismissed as a naive. Peter Hamill says, well, of course, when we say Peter Hamill, he was Irish. For him, Irish is what Armenia is for William Saroyan. And Saroyan was dismissed as a naive. In fact, he's right. Saroyan's characters are naive. You have certainly read the volume of My Name is Saroyan. And in this work, you see the uncles are naive. They laugh, they joke, they laugh at the great ideas of the world because they are naive. But naivete is not a default. Naivete is an important characteristic. It is an aesthetic category. It means that we understand better contradiction in life. The first person that comes to mind is Don Quixote. Don Quixote, who was a naive writer, that is, a man who becomes a cavalry. When the epoch of cavalry is finished, what becomes a cavalry? In distinguishing between this adventurous man, naive man, who becomes a cavalry, the reader understands that the times have changed. And at the same time, the Saroyan's naive characters show that the times have changed, and the times change every time. But naivete is not a default. Naivete is a categorical, aesthetic category. And she says, Peter Hamill, that future generations will recover Saroyan. That is, the future understands what I see before me. And then, besides, Saroyan was a very conflictual man, as very good, and especially with the critics. And I read the critics of My House is in the Highlands, and one of the critics said, this Armenian.
Being Armenian is very naive?
No, not that being Armenian is a naivety. Naivety is a good character, as I showed.
Yeah.
But the critic is saying, this Armenian, because this critic has not understood the play, because the play, My Heart is in the Highlands, was a total revolution at the time of being presented, at the time of staging. People didn't, he was, because at the time, the play has the beginning, the tension, and then the conclusion. Saroyan doesn't start anywhere. Besides, in the time of My Heart is in the Highlands, there is the grandmother Lucy, and I think this is maybe one of the first times in American theater that a character is silent. She doesn't talk. Sometimes she talks, and she talks Armenian. I know Ezra Pound, as you do, Ezra Pound has written poems in different languages, that is in Chinese, has put Arabic, etc. And Saroyan, in this play, he was writing about ethnic questions that the Americans will not use. All the Anglo-Saxon critics could not they evaluated Saroyan according to Anglo-Saxon literary terms. But in fact, they had to take into consideration that Saroyan, belonging to an ethnic minority, he has written about these people. And by the way, to the great honor of William Saroyan, as many others, he is the promoter, one of the great writers of American literature who had written ethnic literature. But always, not only ethnic literature, but made them universal. For example, let us take the stories of My Name is Aram. All these people, when Saroyan said, they made fun of the great ideas of the world. The anchor. Let me give you, this is very, in the story of the Great White Horse, and the story says that an Assyrian who felt very alone and nostalgic learned Armenian and comes to the house of the Karaoğlanian families and becomes there and weeps, saying that I lost my horse. One of the uncles says, "Ah, my brother, we have lost our country and you are weeping for a horse. Enough is enough. We have lost the country and we are resisting, and you lost the horse, you are weeping enough." But this is extraordinary. That is on the one side, a man weeps for his horse, on the other, we have lost the country. But this means to all immigrants, especially in this case, because the event takes place in Karaoğlanian family, this concerns us. Saroyan's lawyer, Arap Kevorkian, says that the critics neglected Saroyan because his outlook didn't coincide with the narrow outlook of book reviewers. That is, in another way to say that his reviews, his outlook was far more progress than those of the writers. Now I will come to an important question, and I wanted these 4 volumes to be distinctive from other volumes, that is, to transcend what the Anglo-Saxon critics have not done. Many other critics have not seen. I wanted these 4 volumes to be distinguished, to give the right value, the right decision that Saroyan volumes. For that reason, I was very meticulous. What do you think in all these 4 volumes, I have taken 3 problematics. I have taken 3 problematics. That is, my thesis concentrates on that time and the momentum of writing. Why that is a problematic, and I took it as a problematic to study. Let me tell you that at the age of 3, William Saroyan lost his father. At the age of 3, he lost his father. And as an extremely sensitive child, he felt his absence. And in my works, when I talked about, referred to his father, as I put presence in his absence, because in all Saroyan works, his father is present as father figures, and he looks after his father. Why? Second problematic, that time. Time cannot be independent of the question of charity. Anybody, he thinks of that, thinks that time will progress, and up to the time when the time of your life, the time of one's life will end, and the man will die. Besides, even one of the greatest ontological and existential philosophers, Martin Heidegger says, time and being are the same thing. Time and the sign, being and time, are very related. Time is important to understand that. That is important to understand time. And then the third aspect is writing momentum. Saroyan chose to write because in writing he found his identity as a writer. He could revive what is that. He could revive essentially his father. And from that, not only that, the question of that, from simple death to death of X, Y, Z, etc. Everybody is going to die. We know that. But he transformed it in his writings into a metaphysical question. That is a metaphysical question, and Saroyan did it.
But is it the death of a person or the death of a nation? Or the death of a homeland?
Extraordinary question, madam. That is, Saroyan was a radical pacifist. He is a radical pacifist because he has the heritage of the Armenian genocide, and he has referred to that on many occasions. Any massive death is death, the question of that brings, and for that reason, we never participated in the publicity of war that they made in the Second World War in America. Participation of
My cousin Dikran, the orator, yeah? And his story, his short story, My Cousin Dikran, the orator.
Yes.
Yeah, we
of course, in that short story, the grandfather who always represents the wisdom in My Name is
Archetypal figure, by the way.
That's, by the way, I just forgot, thank you for reminding me, my heart is in the highlands. In fact, at the end, read again, go and read again, you see that the poet Ben Alexander, when they say that you will leave this house, he was astonished. Okay, we leave you the house. In case you need something, we give you the bed. And he takes leaving his house with such a philosophy that it reminds millions of Armenians who left their homes, traumatized. but he doesn't say traumatized. He gives an elegance and transcendence of living. Why this? Because in the play there is the grandmother of Lucental. The grandmother in Saroyan should represent the history of the Armenian immigration. So it ends not only, besides, again I will come to the question of universality, because Jasper MacGregor is a great Shakespearean actor. And he is a specialist in King Lear. Who is King Lear? King Lear is a poor, naive king who thinks that he will share his kingdom to his daughters, and his daughters will take up. Only Cordelia plays attention to him. And this is another universal aspect of it. Now, as a methodology, I chose the methodology of reading Saroyan and not have general ideas. You know, many critics have general ideas, and this is it. No. Reading Saroyan, reading in quotation marks, that is not with great capital R. It means that you read while reading, you look for meaning. And while reading, you find meaning, and this is very important. The question of when we ask Saroyan, we can even say that all his work, that is tends for meaning, to find the meaning of life, to find the meaning of human relationship, to find the meaning, existential meaning of his being there in the world. Being there is another Heideggerian term. Dasein means being there in the world. In another respect, nobody asks one's opinion to come to the world. Suddenly we find ourselves in the world. We are born and we are there. We have to assume our existence. The other system I took in reading, that is the interdisciplinary system, that is
psychology, philosophy.
No, I haven't. Thank you for
what? No,
I
was just interested in that.
No, I will come to
preemptive.
Your teacher is very impatient. She has to be a little bit patient. No, never mind. There is no problem. By intervention, that is, I take into consideration when reading the Saroyan test, criticism, literature, linguistics, philosophy, psychoanalysis, and the role of the myth. That is, there are many ways of that. You can make a simple linguistic analysis. You have only the linguist. You can. I did not philosophy yet, and this question of philosophy will come back, and psychoanalysis. That is, all these interdisciplinary elements make one to understand Saroyan, and for example, in order that all these problematics, time, death, and the act of writing, should be understood and analyzed in a very multiple manner. And in this case, like any other writer, Saroyan has science. Saroyan has science. You know science, what it means. You know certain signs that are particular to Saroyan. Okay, this you will certainly come in your readings. The other element I took into consideration that is in my analytic approach is discourse on the discourse. That is discourse on the. That is, you take any short story or a novel by William Saroyan, it is a discourse. And in order to make that is another discourse that deconstructs, deconstruction, like this is Jacques Derrida who said that, and while deconstructing the language, at the same time, we could deconstruct the meaning and find new meanings in deconstructing. For that reason, that is my ambition, I hope I realize that, to find a deeper meaning in Saroyan's works. True writing begins when an attempt is made to represent the thing in itself as one of constituent element of representation, and this belongs to language. Language is a representation, and this is another occasion to tell you that what is literature? It is work on language. What is painting? It is work on painting. What is sculpture? It is work on marble or zinc, etc. That is, I concentrated on the fact that on the language, I concentrate on the language and to language, and not abstract and general concepts, language. The research takes language as the point of departure of its discourse. Writing is working the language. This factor characterizes and defines literarity. Literarity means what is going to do with literature. For example, when I say, please bring me a cup of water, it is communication, it is not literature. When I say, in another way, per extra ordinature, bring this benediction of water, it becomes literature. Because it's not the same way of using language. So, literary language, that is, I concentrate on what makes Saroyan's work literature. According to the greatest maybe literary critic, French literary, Roland Barthes, he says that language in itself is lifeless or literal. The writer chooses the words that signifies and take their place in the act of narrating. As I just asked this nice lady to bring me water, and I said, no, bring me benediction of the water, is something else. Besides, in my work, I didn't repeat what there is in the short story, for example. For example, I said that Uncle Millie came and wanted some pomegranate trees, etc. We do not repeat what is in the text, but that is, as a critic, since language is a system of signification par excellence, it cannot signify, and all is focused in it. That is, the systematic consideration, taking into consideration the statement, the role of critics should not reconstitute the message of the word, but focus only on the structure of the system. That is, as a third person who studies the story should study in what manner the writer the writer reconstitutes the message of the work. I'll give you a very famous example, and that famous example is a very masterpiece of short stories. Saroyan, for example, in 70,000 Assyrians. By the way, what is 70,000 Assyrians? And sorry, it's so hard with you. Never mind. Now, in 70,000 Assyrians, a young writer, he needs a haircut, isn't he? But he's loafing around. Having sees that there is barber's college and goes there for 5 cents haircut. And he writes this short story. And then he goes to the barber, but what does he see there? He sees faces that were suffering from poverty and the Great Depression of the times. And he describes their face. And then, what chance? The writer asks, are you Armenian? And the man says, no, I'm not Syrian. It suddenly reminds the writer that he says, me too, I am an Armenian, so what? But I hardly know what life means. That is, it doesn't make an essential problematic of being an Armenian. By the way, I will come back to this, but essentially what I am saying is that at the half of the story, right, and he said, the writer intervenes in his self-appreciation of his own writing. He says that up to this moment, I didn't make any progress. Any journalist with 3 sentences would have written, and he starts to write the short story again. Okay? And in the end, of course, he leaves but there is a great parallel between Saroyan and the Assyrian. And what is Assyria? Assyria is Babylonia. What is Babylonia? Babylonia is the confusion of languages. What is the confusion of languages? The writer who is writing, the young writer, William Saroyan, was in confusion of languages. And he says in this short story very clearly, I want to speak a more universal language, the heart of man. This is another proof of universal aspect of Saroyan literature. Just what I followed as well, what is called the critics of signification. Because as I told you, meaning is there is a meaning to life that now lives, says Saroyan in Rock Program himself. That is, giving sense to a text and look after new meanings. Because there is no one meaning in Saroyan. As any writer, there are multiple meanings in the same way, multiple situations. The other approach in the literary text also, not only in the text, but there is a problematic of the text and the society. And this is a good occasion for me to tell you that we cannot understand the young Saroyan writer, the daring young man on the flying trapeze, without taking into consideration that William Saroyan is a product of the Great Depression that happened in 1929 when the banking system fell down, went bankrupt, and the number of worthless people and were erring in the streets looking for their bread, and people running one place to another in search of a piece of bread. Well, of course, all during the process of this writing, there is the question of transformation. That is, a researcher. I don't consider myself a critic. I am a researcher. Let us say in Armenian, krapan, that is, looking for, in writing, what is, pan is meat. Krapan. And I think it suits me better. Besides, I am very allergic to those people who criticize everything because they think more intelligent than the others. Besides, critics are fake artists and they revenge on poor artists. In my point of view, knowledge succeeds in engendering new knowledge, in transforming themselves actively, modifying one another, simultaneously inviting wider implications. It is not enough to say Saroyan said this, the writer said this, but finding wider implication about it. The wider implication is that which makes Saroyan contemporary, because what makes Saroyan important during the Great Depression? The Great Depression is unimaginable, millions of jobless people. In 1 month, in almost when his book, The Daring Young Man on the Flying Trapeze, was published in 1934, in 15 days, the work became bestseller. It didn't become bestseller for nothing. It became essentially, and many critics agree, because Saroyan's optimism, because Saroyan told people the difficult times will last. You will fight for better times. Your existence as a human being will be appreciated, but you have to pass these difficult moments. For that reason, he inspired hope to people who did not have hope. Another important aspect of Saroyan's language, Saroyan's language is singular and typical Saroyan's. Give me any text and don't tell me he's not, I will tell he's Saroyan or not. In the beginning, when he refused all these classical approaches of languages, because his language is jazzy improvisation. Saroyan, you read, oh, that is, in jazz music, you have maybe heard jazzy music. In jazzy music, the rhythm changes suddenly from one point to another. And Saroyan doesn't follow a subject. He is a jazzy writer, and he was very appreciated in this respect, especially by the writers of the big generation, Jacques Yerevan, who said clearly that he was influenced by free spirit of William Saroyan, and Saroyan's language has a quality, as jazz improvisation, has an extraordinary quality of musicality. For example, the last paragraph says in The Daring Young Man on the Flying Trapeze, then swiftly, neatly, with the grace of the young man, he left his body. He turned his face to the world and an ocean of print. This moment is very important for The Daring Young Man on the Flying Trapeze. For this short story, many critics say that this short story, the writer dies of hunger. Wrong, in my point of view. The writer makes an initiative epiphany. An initiative epiphany for the transformation of his personality into a writer. He dies symbolically, such that the main subject of his he will get used to the idea of that, and he will be a writer. Are we on time, madam? It's okay?
Well, I'm just looking, I think we have some 10 minutes left to have some time for Q&As.
Okay,
So
I will
please
just
go ahead.
conclude this session of presentation. I hope to have been talking, but I just want to conclude. Okay. It was very important for me to conclude this. It was by the words of Lucy Saroyan, that is the daughter of William Saroyan. She herself was an artist, as his son, Saroyan's son, is a great writer. Let me read you what she writes about her father. He could make something of anything. He saw beauty in everything. That's what made him such a wonderful writer. What truly good writing is taking an ordinary situation and making it extraordinary. I repeat this part. What truly good writing is taking an ordinary situation and making it extraordinary. Not taking an extraordinary situation and recreating it. That is too easy. He did in life what he did in his work. He took ordinary situations and made them magnificent, made them awe-inspiring and full of wonder. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's time for Q&A. Who has questions? So the lecture was so detailed and the presentation was so profound. I think that any question was elucidated in a remarkable way. Thank you very much, Mr. Hagop Papazian.
You are most welcome.
Yeah, sorry for
The
some
pleasure is
technical inconveniences, because we thought that we could postpone the time of the exam, but it turned out that the lecturer was in a hurry and he just
Okay.
couldn't provide us with the possibility.
I hope the essential message was left, okay, that is the essential thing. But frankly speaking, I am more for more good organization such that the message will pass clearly and evidently to everybody. The question of organization is very important.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but sometimes we depend on others in organizational issues, and we fail in our expectations. Sometimes it happens. Anyway, I have a question.
Yes.
I'll start with it because I'm mainly interested in the problem of American immigrant literature. Yeah, because immigration literature has its peculiarities. And Armenians want, in a sense, to appropriate Saroyan, to make him Armenian by nature and by his style of writing. But I think that he demonstrates the typical, vivid example of the immigration literature, because he preserves some historical traditions, but he maintains the commitment to the language, the commitment to Americanism, and the commitment to multiculturalism, which we can observe in his works. For example, I can't help quoting the story of Locomotive 38, Ojibwe.
Ojibwe?
Yeah, one of the best stories I have ever encountered. When he presents the idea of being an American, an inherent, innate American, how you study being an American, being from different culture. By the way, I don't like citing much political leaders in literary classes, but I quite remember Ronald Reagan's, an expert from Ronald Reagan's speech. He said that you can go to Germany being an Armenian and be a German Armenian. You can go to France being, suppose, Georgian and be a German, a French Georgian. But whenever you step on the shore of the United States of America, you are American. Whatever happens, you are American. So, for you, well, I see such a profound research. It is so detailed. I think Saroyan is lucky to have such a profound research because many, many distinguished authors have never encountered a chance in their lives to have such a, I don't know, well, detailed description of his life and activity. But what do you think? Is Saroyan anyhow Armenian, regardless his historical roots, regardless his cultural commitments? I think that he is a purely American writer. Nothing to do with Armenian, and this trend of presenting him as an Armenian writer fails. It collapses from time to time.
The volume of The Daring Young Man on the Flying Trapeze, with 26 short stories, is very much influenced by James Joyce's The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. And in this, at the end of the short story, the dialogue says, I will forge the smithy consciousness of my people. And Saroyan did forge the smithy consciousness of his people. Saroyan is deeply, and his writings deal with ethnic community of immigrants, their sense of not belonging anywhere on earth, their uprootedness, their difficulty to integrate in their newly adopted countries, their nostalgia for home and their desire to return. These are told sometimes tragically, but often with great Saroyanist humor. In a recent review in New York Times book review, Edward Ogden takes note of the fact that Saroyan has been a profoundly innovative ethnic writer, one of the first in America, and needs to be added in this connection is that Saroyan was the first ethnic writer to carry ethnic element into universal. That is, it doesn't stay in ethnic element, in universal. It is in the naturalness and ease with which he achieves transformation in that Saroyan originality, right? And I think this review was, I'm not sure, but imagine this, if you want, I can read this part 10 times, because it says that this man, he is known by many other critics. He was the promoter of ethnic literature in America. And what the Anglo-Saxon critics did not see this, that this man has allegorical stories, Armenian fables, Armenian short stories, Armenian immigrants, Mexican immigrants, Jewish immigrants, and they only took their Occidental American terms. And I think this review is in honor that he is an ethnic writer, at the same time, deeply Armenian.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Bana yes, come high school member. You are actually hiring. Yes.
Hunter'ım hayırına gaskına var.
En az o İslam'ın Saroyan'ın akide.
Ayo.
Tarihleri araç, birinci sıradan metodikayı, karşı pasmacan olmayı, bu göre bir aşağıya asazuruz.
Ayo.
Tarih pasmacanla göre asazuruz. Saroyan'ı hep.
Ayo.
Sensasyon var ya.
Genuine conversation with William Saroyan.
Aslında oraya işor derler. հրապարակված է միայն 50%-ը, կեսը։
Այո։
Եթե Կարի Պասմոկյանը ճիշտ է հաղորդում, նշանակում է մենք կիսով չափ գիտենք Սարոյանին, ես ուզում եմ ճշտել դա, իսկապես դա այդպես է, դա այդպես չի, այսինքն կիսով չափ Սարոյանը թարգման բան չի, տպագրված չի, հրատարակված չի, մենք կիսով չափ գիտենք նրա, թե ինչ-որ մի բան կասված է այստեղ։
Շատ բարի հայրենագից, գուզեք հայերեն բադասխանեմ թե անգլերեն։
Երևի իրենց նույնպես պետալի է։
Ես գրնամ թե անգլերեն խոսի թե հայերեն։
Let's make a highlight just for a change because we are going to present it on our site and it will look...
Okay, հայերենը բրոսան։ Հարկելի հայրենագից, դուք շատ իրավունք ունիք, ես երկու բան բացատրեմ։ Saroyan'ı Sabes Martin. Saroyan plays straight. Keep you this in mind. Saroyan, if he says a word, he has talked about the word many times. And he has a great quality. Saroyan says, in one of his writings, I kept in mind, timeless thoughts. I think in anjamanat metatokutyum. Martik kısayı var sentimental. The Saroyan said, it is sentimental to be a human being. He is radically a rational writer. Ուրեմն ասya bazıgatsak hayrına git, Anklerin ol. Now, let me tell you something. Starting in the year of exactly, I don't remember, maybe 60s, etc., Saroyan didn't give any play to Broadway because Broadway has become a commercial scene. But Saroyan, theater is theater, theater is serious, dealing problems of people and existential problems. He didn't give. And then when critics found that, besides there is another point I forgot. Saroyan in 1954, they became the university critic. That is critics that had university criteria. Saroyan refused such a thing. For that reason, my dear compatriot, he went on writing, and all these writings, I think it is kept in Saroyan Foundation, and I don't know, I cannot have any opinion what he has written about, but you are right, that is a great deal of Saroyan works are not published and they are still at Saroyan Foundation, and we hope you, students, in the future will reveal all the Saroyan treasures in the future.
And another practical question I very
Please do. Please.
Do you collaborate with Scott Sedrakan's foundation? Because he, I think, recently he was in Yerevan and he was demonstrating special collections, volumes.
Well, I will be very honest. I appealed, I wrote to Saroyan Foundation about my 4 volumes. I didn't have any answer. I had on 2 occasions, I had no answer, and unfortunately, madam, this is not acceptable to the rule. These 4 volumes are written, self-published book. That is, I worked for this and paid for this, and Saroyan Foundation and others I will not name, because I could not halfway answer this, some my character, and I told them about this on 2 occasions, no answer, no problem. I couldn't care less. My 4 volumes speak for me.
Yeah, definitely.
Self-published, they talked for me.
It's a work of life. Thank you again, our distinguished guest, for taking his time, for presenting this wonderful lecture, and especially for the work, because people are mortal, we are all going to pass away, regardless of our age, whatever happens. But this remains and transcends through centuries. And first of all, we are grateful to you for this immense input into Saroyan's creative.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine. In fact,
Yeah.
this is the second lecture, and meeting. You know, I am a diasporic Armenian. I am born in Lebanon, and 50 years I live in Paris. And meeting you here and this nice welcome you give me, it's a great spiritual satisfaction for me. But I wish you wanted. That doesn't mean for Saroyan sadness. It is sadness. It is nostalgic. It is existential, ontological. But he was for goodness, for the happiness in life. And any work you do, dear student, do it with patience. Do it with satisfaction, intellectual. I say in this book that the moment these 4 volumes are written, they do not belong to me. They belong to the readers. I want the readers to give new ideas to me and to literature, if possible, such that we can enrich the work of William Saroyan.
Let's express our gratitude with warm applause once again.